Hey everyone, this is Adam from CompleteWorshipDrummer.com, and in this video we're going to talk about my top 5 tips to becoming a better worship drummer. Growing up, my first exposure to playing with other people was in the worship band at my church. I definitely took lessons growing up to learn how to play, but I never had specific drumming advice for playing in church. So while this list isn't all exclusive to drumming in church, these top 5 tips would have really helped me back when I started to play in church. If I'd have known a lot of these, I would have avoided a ton of mistakes. One of my biggest mistakes is not working on my timing enough in the beginning and not realizing how important it is. When I was younger, I was known as the drummer who was great at drums. I could play impressive things and I could turn heads with the things I could play, but I was really bad at playing with other people. It used to drive me crazy and it made me feel like a total fraud. This leads me to my first point, which is number 1, timing above all. Let's get drumming practical right off the bat here. When you are playing with a group, nothing matters more than timing. Repeat after me. If I can play fast rolls and complex fills but have not solid timing, as a drummer, I'm nothing. If I have the fanciest drum set with the best cymbals, but I have not solid timing, as a drummer, I am nothing. If I practice my drums for hours every day, but have not solid timing, as a drummer, I am nothing. If I think I sound amazing when I'm by myself in my basement, but I have not solid timing, that as a drummer, I am nothing. I think my point has been made. If you don't have solid timing, no worship band and no band in general is going to be able to play with you. As a drummer, you have the ability to keep the service moving, and by the same token, you have the ability to really derail the entire worship experience. With such great responsibility, I would highly suggest buying or digging out that metronome and use it every single time you practice. Even if you aren't playing with a click live, I would highly recommend practicing with one because it will improve your internal clock. When I was growing up playing in church, I often had the responsibility of clicking off the songs, and sometimes somewhere in between the beginning of the service and when we needed to start the song, I completely forgot the tempo of the song. This resulted in me hilariously starting the song way too fast and then having to fight to slow it down throughout the song. If you ever found yourself in a similar situation, the simplest remedy for this is to keep a visual metronome back behind the drums with you so you can start off the songs at the right tempo. If you think you might need help working on your timing, I have a video on this of how to effectively practice with a metronome here. The ability to play with great timing and feel will create a positive experience for everyone on the team, and though it's not ideal, you can even potentially disguise nerves or feelings of unpreparedness. That leads me to my second tip, which is number 2, showing up to rehearsal fully prepared. After timing, being prepared is probably the most important part of being a worship drummer. This means spending personal time listening to the songs and making sure you know the arrangements or the roadmaps of the song before you get to rehearsal. One of the reasons you need to be very familiar with the arrangements as the drummer is because you're in the driver's seat for the dynamics. Dynamics is the ability to enhance the music with different levels of intensity in your playing. Worship music is extremely dynamic, and when the drummer plays dynamically, the entire band will follow you. If you aren't fully versed in the arrangements of the song, then you can't anticipate when to hold back and when to let loose. A huge part of playing dynamically are the loud build-ups in worship music. Knowing the arrangement will allow you to plan out your builds so that there is a steady and gradual increase in volume, and maybe even adding more layers to your build so that you can lead the congregation to the eventual peak of the song. Realizing that you have the potential to enhance or disrupt the atmosphere of worship really hits home the importance of being prepared. Becoming confident with the song arrangements can be very time-consuming without the right method. As an instructor, I teach my students how to learn the song arrangements quickly without relying on memorization, listening to songs on repeat, or needing to see someone play the song. By doing so, they become fully equipped to focus on the ultimate goal of worshiping God and enhancing the atmosphere of worship for the rest of the congregation. One of the ways I help my students prepare much faster is also my next tip, which is number 3, learn to simplify. A huge part of being a worship drummer is learning songs being performed by professional drummers. You might not be at that drummer's level to play it exactly like them, and that's totally okay. With smart and intentional practice, you can get to the level to play it how they do, but if you don't realistically have the time to invest before rehearsal, then there is no shame in simplifying the parts. If you can't play it in time and at the proper tempo, don't bother trying to pull it off on the day of rehearsal or during the worship service. There are many ways to simplify the songs, and here are 2 ways to do this. Remove a voicing on the drum set. A voicing is anything that can be played on the drum set. The drums, the cymbals, the percussion, rim clicks, sample pads, etc. So maybe you're trying to learn a song where the drummer in the recording might be playing a cool snare part while playing the bass drum and playing the hi-hat pedal. There is no shame in removing the voicing that will make the least audible difference. Out of all 3 of these voicings in this example, I would probably choose the hi-hat pedal. If you remove the hi-hat pedal and you still can't play it at the right tempo in time, then you might have to simplify the rhythm. Here, let me show you an example. Okay guys, we're here at the kit. I'm going to show you this example of the second verse beat from All Hail King Jesus. It's got this syncopated kick part, and then you're playing hi-hat foot pedal on the upbeat, and then you got this 16th note pattern in the snare, and it goes like this. Obviously it's a pretty cool beat, but let's say that you have to play this Sunday and it's Wednesday and you're working on this and you can't quite get the hi-hat pedal and the bass drum and the snare, and it's kind of all falling apart. And so I'd highly recommend to remove one voicing to make it easier for yourself in order to simplify it. And so in this instance, I would suggest the hi-hat foot pedal and then keep the bass drum and the snare, because those are going to be the more important voicings to keep the band together and all of that. And so it would just sound like this. Obviously, it sounds much cooler with the hi-hat in there, but anytime you are struggling with playing a certain part, it is usually because of independence and coordination issues. And those are the kind of issues that take the most amount of time to work through. And so if it's Wednesday and you got to play this by Sunday, or maybe it's even Saturday and you got to play it by Sunday, you're probably not going to have time to be able to work through all of that. And so I highly suggest to remove one voicing, and you can even take this further if you needed to, and you could take out all the 16th notes and just make sure you're playing the accents. And so it could just be like, of course, that's simplifying it even further, but we're still getting exactly what we need from that groove in order to keep the band together and still keep somewhat of the same feel. Obviously, it's much cooler to play the beats how they're supposed to be, but we need to think about the amount of time we have to practice the songs based on where we're at skill-wise. And so that is exactly how we remove a voicing. Worship drummers love to play syncopated tom beats or place kick drums on the offbeats during grooves. If you can't play this and make it smooth and in time and at tempo, then simplify the rhythm and play it straight. This is especially true when you may not yet have the coordination to play a section of the song. Okay, so here's an example of simplifying the rhythm. So we're going to bring it back to that same example, and then this time we're going to change the kick pattern. So, because you notice the kick pattern is a little bit syncopated, we're actually playing the bass drum on that 4th, 16th note. And so we're going to make it just straight, and that will simplify the rhythm quite a bit. This is the syncopated way. Now I'll play it straight. And so you're putting those first 2 kicks just on the one and the and to simplify the rhythm and make it a little bit easier to play, because whenever we have syncopation, it's a little bit more difficult. And the only people who are really going to notice that you change the rhythm like that are going to be maybe the drummers in the audience and maybe your bass player. So we're really not sacrificing too much, and I don't think it's going to ruin the flow of worship if you move one note over by a 16th note. And so that's a pretty good example of simplifying the rhythm, but I want to show you another one with just like a simple groove on the hi-hat, kick, and snare. And so I'll play something pretty syncopated with the kick, and then I'll go ahead and play it straight just so you can hear the differences there. So we got. And now I'll play it straight, try to straighten it up a little bit, make it a little bit easier to play. So like I said, that is a very good example of simplifying the rhythm. And the only people who are going to notice are either your drummers in the audience or maybe your bass player. So I don't think we're sacrificing too much if we change our rhythm to make the beats a little bit easier to play. So there is a couple examples of how to simplify the rhythm. Sometimes simplifying the parts will allow you to better serve the song and be more effective team player to the worship team, which leads me to my next point. Number 4, be a team player. Playing on the worship team and creating an atmosphere of worship is a team effort. We all need to be playing our part and also being flexible to other members. A healthy collaborative environment and egos will never mix. Remember, it's not about you, the songs you want to play, or the parts you want to play. As a team member, we are often under the authority of a worship leader, and we should do our very best to comply with their requests, even if they ask for something that goes against our initial musical sensibilities. This can be a difficult situation if the worship leader is much younger than some of the team members, but I believe deferring to the authority put in place is the right thing to do. If you have a hard time respecting your worship leader or complying with his or her requests, then you should probably be praying about if you're playing on the right team. Perhaps God is leading you to use your gift elsewhere. Being a supportive team player often involves prioritizing the spiritual self-care necessary to bring your best to each rehearsal and service. That leads me to my final point of how to be a better worship drummer, and that is number 5, making sure you're being spiritually fed. Playing drums at church is a ministry and a sacrifice. You are giving of yourself, your time, into showing up and practicing. If you aren't being well fed by regular prayer, teaching, and hearing and reading of the Word of God, you won't have anything left to give when you get behind the drums. If we overlook this tip, we can easily get burnt out or worse, lose sight of why we are playing drums for God in the first place. Make sure you spend personal time reading God's Word, praying regularly, and asking Him to reveal anything He has for you. Don't be that musician who only hangs out backstage during service. Be intentional to join your church community in the service and listen to the message being preached each week. Be intentional about both growing in your faith first and second, growing as a drummer. To support this, here are 2 great Bible verses. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Matthew 5:6. So faith comes from hearing, and hearing by the word of Christ. Romans 10:17. So to recap, the top 5 tips to becoming a better worship drummer are: number 1, timing above all; number 2, showing up fully prepared; number 3, learn to simplify parts; number 4, be a team player; and number 5, make sure you're being spiritually fed. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe so you can be notified when I put out new content like this one. And if you want to help me reach more drummers, then make sure to slam that like button for me. I'll see you in the next video on the next screen.